Well, let me begin by saying good evening. Tonight is July the 25th, 2023. Uh, again, I do want to say special to our virtual audience. I want to thank God for our leaders who covered for us on last week while we were away. But tonight, I do want to kind of get right back to uh, talking about the subject that we broached and began to talk about on last week, and week before last, and that was this tough subject about providence. And I told you we'll probably be here for a while. I have taught about providence over the years. I don't know how many times. I went back and looked over a lot of our lessons, but I haven't taught it or presented it in the way that I'm feeling led to teach it and present it to us on this evening or throughout this study, if you will. I kind of want to talk about why people have problems with providence. And if you have problems with providence, you're going to have problems with a lot of things as it relates to God. Last time we talked about the problems we had with providence, our problems with God's providence, was that it's hard. It's just hard. It just, if God made providence easy, if God made providence, smooth, silky smooth, if all of God's providential acts, whether directly, or indirectly, if they were, easy, then we would accept it. But the thing about the providence of God, the things that God does in our lives, around our lives with circumstances, again, whether they are, directly or indirectly. When we say that, we keep using those terms. God can providentially work directly through a miracle, or he can work indirectly through circumstances where he doesn't have to deal with miracles. God will go, he will override laws. Let me put it like that. With miracles, God can override laws, where it is walking on water or making water stand still or anything like that, or bread multiplying in his hand, fishes multiplying in his hands. That's God intervening providentially in people's lives directly. But then there's that indirectly providential invasion, if you will, of God in our lives that really causes much of the problems for us. And then it's always hard. It's hard. I mean, when God, providentially invaded Job's life, it was hard. The very fact that Job would lose the things that he lost, those things were hard, providentially for David to become the man that he would become even after sinning with Bathsheba and all of that, and then to see the results of the providence of God working in his life through what his son did to the daughter, what another son did to the other son, and to see all those things, ladies and gentlemen, are hard. And that's why people don't like providence, because it kind of sets God up to where we don't know what he's going to do. It kind of sets God up to where we can't control what he's going to do. It kind of set God up to where we don't have any say so. And y'all know we like to say so. Say so. Say so. Y'all know we like to have input. Y'all know we like to make decisions. Y'all know we like to be considered, as it relates to things with our lives. And the providence of God says God doesn't have to consider us. The providence of God says he controls everything. The providence of God says many things. And so I'm hoping and praying tonight we're recording and everything is right tonight, because I know last time we were told that particular session didn't carry through. So please, let's make sure. I'll try to entwine some things from last time we spoke with tonight to try and make it a blend. But as we said, the first presentation I made, that the providence of God is hard. And when we think of those times that God providentially worked in our lives for his glory and for our good, and more than likely we didn't like it, it was something that we wouldn't have chose. We wouldn't have chose, to have had a stillbirth. We wouldn't have chose, for, our children to have any health issues or challenge. We wouldn't have chose for the stroke or for the sickness, or we wouldn't have chose for COVID. We wouldn't have made those types of choices. But that's, again, God providentially, if you will, acting in the earth and in our lives, because it's all his, without asking us for our input. And so I got to thinking, and I just wrote a couple things down before I came out, because tonight we're going to talk about our problem with God's providence is that it's invisible. See, if it was something that we could see, reach, touch, and point to, then we probably wouldn't have as many problems that we have with it. But because it's invisible, kind of hard to understand, there are problems upon problems that are added to it because it's invisible. When we think of that term invisible, sometimes your kids, I play a game with my grandkids sometime, and outside of the floor is lava when you got to jump off the floor. But we play another game. I like to play the sleeping game. They don't like to play the sleeping game and the quiet game. No, Poppy, I don't want to play the quiet game. No, Poppy, I don't want to play the sleeping game, because they know that. But we do play another one, and basically it's the invisible game. And then the invisible game is basically when we play like, we're invisible. And if you are, or I am invisible to my grandchildren, then we ignore each other. And in a sense, because providence is invisible, many people ignore its existence. Or they believe it's non-existent. And so I want to come from that angle tonight as we get to dealing with providence and it being invisible. Not just because many may ignore it. And when you ignore providence in the theology of God, you're going to have problems. Matter of fact, I wrote this, and let me just go ahead and jump in there. Now, my mother, I'm a 60s baby, born in 1961. I remember when Kennedy said we were going to build a spaceship and send a man to the moon. And for about 2 decades, I lived with some folk who swear man ain't went to the moon. I don't care what you say. Hey, they went somewhere over there in Nevada. They went somewhere over there. They ain't went to no moon. Ain't no man went to no moon. Ain't no man went to the moon. And again, you got to understand, my parents at that particular time didn't have the deepest of education. And so they couldn't fathom, even though they heard of NASA and saw all the people making all that money, all those engineers working, building rockets, testing rockets, and lived right here in Texas. They could not fathom in their mind a spaceship, putting a man in it, and sending them to the moon. And so since they couldn't comprehend it, they just denied it. Because they could not comprehend it, they denied it. So I always struggled in my earlier years. I came to understand in my later years what their struggle was. But I always struggled with why did they struggle with not believing that a spaceship would go to the moon? Well, I'm looking at some engineers, some men here working here, and I got to think about this. Is some of the things I wrote. I believe my parents struggled with spaceship and sending man to the moon because as it dealt with fundamental laws of physics, my mom and dad didn't know nothing about that. If you ask my mom and dad about fundamental laws of physics, they had no clue what fundamental laws of physics are. They had no idea what thermodynamics was. They had no clue what was the Newton laws of motion. They had no clue about the universal laws of gravitation. And they didn't know trigonometry and all of those things that it would take. I hope you understand what I'm saying, for that to happen. And since they could not comprehend the laws of gravitation, thermodynamics, and all of that type of thing, they said, ain't no way they could go to the moon. Well, that same thing happened in the spiritual world. Because people don't understand things like election, sovereignty, predestination, salvation, soteriology, hamartology, all those ologies, if you will, because people don't understand atonement, disposition, things like that. They can't, and the only thing they know about is grace, love, and mercy. Because they don't know about those other deeper things. Their understanding and belief of God is just kind of shallow. And so because their understanding and belief of God is kind of shallow, when God does something deep, they don't believe he could do it. But y'all, our God is deeper than deep. I need y'all to understand that. Our God is wider than wide. He's greater than great. And so it's incumbent upon us to come to understand things like what we're talking about tonight, providence, because when you understand things like providence, election, and predestination, and all those types of things, God doesn't actually become sour to us. He really becomes sweet. The very fact that I understand predestination and election and providence, what we're talking about tonight, y'all, that ain't no curse to me. That's not sour taste in my mouth. Y'all, that's sweetness. That's joy that God providentially is in control of all circumstances that I experience. Y'all, that's good news to me. But because many kind of still deal with the superficial surface stuff, and because God's providence is, it's invisible, if you will, it's unseeable, it's imperceivable, if you will, it's concealed. That's the word I was looking for. It's concealed, because God don't flash his providence, God don't flash his providence. It's concealed. There are many who don't understand God like that, and because they don't understand God like that, then they can't understand God like he is. Providence is who God is. So if you could see God's providence, do you understand what I'm saying? If you could see God's providence, then you would see him. And we know we can't what? See him. But y'all, for those of us who are believers, we what? Know him. God is holy, holy, holy. And Isaiah and the angels, they did their best to try to describe it. The instruments in the tabernacle and in the temple, they do their best to reflect it. And that's why sometimes, when it comes to worship or church or whatever like that, you see this casuality, you see this laxity, you see this freedom that folk think is okay, but it's not okay because we don't consider the holiness, the sacrilegiousness, the deepness, the requirements of God. And we think if we can't fix it or handle it or deal with it, then it doesn't exist. If it's invisible, we ignore it. If it's invisible, it didn't happen. And we don't understand it, it didn't happen. Because my mom and dad couldn't understand the laws of thermodynamics, gravitational, Newton's laws and all of that, they couldn't imagine, a ship going up, landing on the moon and being able to thrust off, circle, come back, go through what it goes through in regards to that heat, heating up and all that, don't burn up, and land safely and softly in the ocean. I couldn't believe that. But all of us have things in our pockets right now, telephones and all of that stuff that say they got to be going somewhere. I mean, the satellites up there, I mean, you can't just stick satellites in Nevada, where mom thought that's where they were going, dad thought they were going. You can't just stick satellites, out in the desert and now, reach the whole world. So I'm saying all that now. I'm trying to set this up so I can kind of ease through it. I want you to understand, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, providence, I know is hard, but it's also invisible. But because it's invisible, we don't get to deny it or ignore it. And when you embrace it, when you understand it, God becomes, so sweet. People say, I wouldn't serve a God who would, I got to function like a robot. I'm like, well, you don't understand. We need to be grateful that God is providential as it relates to being over all of our lives. And so, in the weeks and months to come, we're going to be dealing with the provision of providence and how providence and government relate, how providence in history has unfolded, how with providence there are primary and secondary causes, how with providence there is redemptive history and secular history, providence in the church, providence in evil, providence in miracles, providence in prayers. How does that work? And providence in just many other things. But once you get an understanding of providence and embrace it, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, God just becomes, in my mind, just so much sweeter. Yes, it's invisible, and yes, it's hard. But ladies and gentlemen, this mystery of providence is sweet when you come to understand it. It's sweet and it's not sour when we come to understand it. And in understanding God's providence, it makes the believer comfortable, not uncomfortable. I told y'all, some years ago, I kind of embraced it and it got to me. And I know sometimes when I say it, it seems offensive. And although that's not my intent, I know to say it kind of seems offensive. But if you don't understand providence, then you would be offended by it. But if you understand providence, you won't be offended by what I've been saying. And here's what I'm saying. I've always said this. Listen, ain't nobody going to hell because of me. And ain't nobody going to heaven because of me. Folk going to hell and heaven, brother, because of God. Rejecting him. No one is going because of me. And so I embrace that, and now I just preach and teach the Bible and go through it, and whether you like it, love it, or not, I'm just going to teach it, because whether you embrace it or not, whether you go to heaven or hell or not, it ain't going to be because of me. Providence, election, predestination, predetermination. These are the things that afford people heaven or hell. So I'm comfortable with that because I have embraced the providence of God. Providence tells us that God is in control of all of my circumstances and your circumstances. Providence says, you know that song? Providence says that he has ordered my steps. I'm a living picture of providence. That was nothing about me that said preacher. That was nothing about me that said pastor. Excuse me. I never said I want to be a preacher. I want to be a pastor. Truth of the matter is, I didn't even want to be saved. God had to draw me to him for that. And then when I see the providence of God with the exception of Jenny, there's no one in this whole room, in the media, and in the other places around here, and I wouldn't even know any of y'all if it wasn't for the providence of God. If it wasn't for the providence of God, we'd be living in Jacksonville, Florida. You know, providence of God. So, I guess what I'm trying to get us to see is when we embrace the providence of God, that's us understanding that God has ordered our steps. You may not like it, but boy, when you begin to walk in it, you will enjoy it. You may not get paid for what you do. You may not even get the recognition that you think you do. But when you understand that the steps you are walking in are the steps that are ordered by God, it's so much satisfaction. It's complete satisfaction in that. Complete satisfaction. You don't look at the other person with a newer car and say, I got to hustle and grind to get me one, because you don't look at another person, what they have, and compare yourself with that. You just understand, I'm getting up, I'm living, I'm functioning, I'm ordering, I'm doing what God's told me. He's ordered my steps, and this is, I don't know what the end's going to be. I know what the end is ultimately going to be, heaven, but as it relates to him choosing me to preach, pastor, write books, train pastors around the globe, and all that stuff, none of those things were my plans. But when you understand providence, then you understand that God orders your steps. What is it about knowing about the providence of God that could be threatening to anyone? Now, if you don't understand the providence of God, then I understand why it's threatening. But if you understand the providence of God, it can't be threatening. I know that sounds like an oxymoron. When you understand the providence, what is it about it? Now, so let me say it real slow. Why wouldn't you want anything other than what God in his providence has wisely foreordained in your life? Why wouldn't you want that? I mean, you say you're a Christian. Excuse me, you say you've been Galatians 2:20, you've been crucified, no longer I who, but it's Christ who lives in me, and the life I live now, I live it by faith. And so why wouldn't then we want providentially with our lives what he wants providentially with our lives? That's nothing to not want as it relates to providence when you understand providence. Why wouldn't you want other than what God wants? Let's look at our lesson tonight. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 through 34. I'll start reading that in a little bit, but let me read my opening statement. Again, excuse my cough tonight. Because the word providence is slowly disappearing from the vocabulary of the contemporary church, the culture in which we now live has little room for thoughts of God's providence. What is God's providence? The governance of God by which he alone, with wisdom and love, cares for and directs what things? All things in the universe. The providence of God says, isn't like July like Shark Month or Sharknado Month or something like that? Huh? Shark Week. Okay, all right. And, as I said before, when you think of all of the billions and billions of animals that make up the sea, God providentially made it to where this one thing in the sea would be food for the next thing in the sea, would be food for another thing in the sea, would be food for another thing in the sea, would be food for another. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody get to eat. Ain't nobody hungry in the sea, y'all. You don't see sharks losing weight. They're getting bigger and bigger. Megalotrons or whatever you call it. You see what I'm saying? Big white, blues or whatever you call it. That's why they got a whole shark week now. Sharks ain't starving. Y'all not hearing me. How is it that we believe that God could feed them, care for them, and he won't care for us? See, when you embrace the providence of God, you get to thinking. I know you say, well, you know, my situation should be better. But God knows if your situation would be better, you might be badder. Okay, I will make it plain. I heard that on that. If my situation was better, you might be badder. Now, boss, how are you going to say that? Okay, well, let me say it the way Jesus says. And he says it 3 times in the gospel, so y'all go figure it out. It's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel. Go through the eye of a needle. Of course, we know he's not talking about the threading needle. That was a gate in the wall in Jerusalem City, and that gate was called the eye of the needle. And when a camel would go through it, he just couldn't walk through it. He'd have to break down. If you ever have ridden a camel, break down and get all the way down on it and make it. It's tough to get through it, but he can get through it. The eye of the needle. He said it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. He says it 3 times. You know why? Because if you had everything you wanted, you wouldn't want him. So he keep us broke so that we won't be so bad. He keeps us dependent upon him providentially because he knows if we were to get independent of him, we may forget about him. And you say, I would never do nothing like that. Yeah, that's what David said last week, too, a week before last when we was talking about, him being on the roof, seeing Bathsheba. David didn't plan it. David didn't pull out his BlackBerry phone or, schedule, I'm going to see, what's that girl name stay next door? What's that girl over there? Bathsheba? Yeah, what time she bathed? David didn't plan that. You know what I'm saying? Now, I would never do that. There's no way I would ever do it and did it. Moses, God called you to do this, and you let them people talk you into hitting the rock, not force you, but make you hit the rock and miss out on all that I'd already promised you. Don't you ever sit here and say what you would not do. See, we have a misunderstanding about our righteousness. I'll give you this example and I'll move further with this lesson. we under this impression once we get saved. Let's just say we had Jesus Christ on this side. And give me the name of some heinous, and we don't want to use Hitler because I use him too many times. Y'all think I'm in love with Hitler. Give me some other mass murderer. Give me a heinous Jeffrey Dahmer. There it is right there. Jeffrey Dahmer. Thank you. Good one. Well, let's say we got Jesus Christ standing to the left of me, Jeffrey Dahmer to the right of me. All right, let's just say that's the case. And Jesus Christ to the left of me, Jeffrey Dahmer, he was the serial killer, right? Killing people and all that stuff. Yeah, we got him on here. Let me tell you what most people believe. Yeah, eating them too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Woo, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Yeah, and I'm glad that was kind of eerie. Thank you for that. Let me tell you what happened when most of us get saved. We think we more like Christ than we are Jeffrey Dahmer. But can I tell you something like my grandbaby say? Poppy, can I tell you something? Even when you're saved, you are closer to Jeffrey Dahmer than you are to Jesus Christ. Because the only time that we become like Christ is when we get that glorified body. When we're in his presence. Y'all understand what I'm saying? When we're in his presence, that's when we become like him. But while we're on earth, okay, if you've been saved 20 or 30 years, you are closer to Jeffrey Dahmer than you are to Jesus Christ. And that's why Jeremiah tried to tell us way back in the Old Testament. Our hearts are deceitful, desperately wicked. Who can know it? You don't even know it. You do something and you look at it like, dang, I can't believe I did that. Your conscience be riddling you all the way. Don't do it, don't do it. I'm doing it. Don't say it, don't say it. Psst, you say it. God tell you give, give, give. You say, I ain't giving. God tell you serve, serve. I ain't serving. And we're talking about saved folk. You understand what I'm saying? See, we got under this impression, and once we get saved, we're more like him than we're like him. Y'all, we're more like him than we're like him. Our propensity to do evil is greater, even though we're saved. Because that doesn't happen until we become, think about Paul, outside of Jesus Christ on earth, you gotta put him somewhere second, third, somewhere. Paul even admitted to having issues. Providence of God. It's the governance by which God, with wisdom and love, cares for and directs all things in the universe. What am I saying? For many who claim to be Christian, it's not that God's providence is just invisible. Many see it as non-existence. In Adam Smith's 18th century classic work, The Wealth of Nations, this book was written in like 1776 or something like that. He wrote, the hand of God's providence has been chopped off altogether. And with that amputation, we are left to grope alone in a hostile or even worse, an indifferent universe. We look no more to the invisible hand of providence for our economic well-being, but to the what? Highly visible hand of human government to solve all our questions. Y'all, this was written in 1700. It was written in 1700. The 18th century by Adam Smith. He was a Scottish economist and a philosopher. And he basically said, you know what I mean? Listen to what he's saying. Man, listen. We cut God's hand out. We don't need the providence. We don't need his invisible hand. Let's deal with the government, the hand, you know, that we can. And here's the thing. There are many today who know who may have never even heard that, maybe even spoke that, but that's exactly how they live. And he's literally telling us back then that you know, instead of the providence in the hand of God, that's when people say, you know, don't get me wrong, I vote, and I vote biblically, so I don't have no party, I vote biblically. But when I vote, listen, I could give a flying fig who in office because I know who's over the office. And I know providentially, it doesn't matter who in the White House. The providence of God is going to be laid out just as he wanted to be without any interruptions. But then we get to looking and blaming people and parties and fighting amongst ourselves and stuff like that. You know, one race will blame another race, this other stuff, and And I'm like, man, what? Because see, I think probably, I know I'm finna get politically in trouble. Y'all know I'm talking politics. I think the first time people kind of believed in the providence of God was when Trump did get elected in office. That's what folks think, ain't no way. And then he did. And I told people long before he got in it, I said, I'm not saying he deserved to be in office, but my family and other people close to you tell you, I tell them, but he's probably going to get the office because America deserves him for what we've done to God. And God will use somebody like that to show us just how far from God we are. Providence of God. So I don't sit up and pack. I don't shoot. I don't go to the D.C. and create an insurrection. I've been saying resurrection. An insurrection. I believe in the providence of God. I don't look for government to solve our problems. I understand that the invisible, providential hand of God is in control of all things. Reading on. Because words have a nasty habit of slipping in and out of vogue, fashion and time. That's why I have to learn some words, so I can be with y'all like dripping. Like I'm dripping. I'm dripping tonight. And then something earlier today, I was talking to somebody sent me a thing, and we had a little conversation going when we were out of town last week, and they put some fire sticks on it. And so I'm thinking that with the fire emojis, it's a big problem. But I found out, the fact that the person that put fire, see, yeah, okay, y'all millennials laughing at me. People my age, when we see that's fire, that's a problem. But I found out fire, and I had 3 sticks of fire. That's fire, Pastor. That's fire, Pastor. Well, because words have a habit of slipping in and out of vogue. They're here for a season and they're gone. They change their meaning. They change, with periods of time and fashion. One generation phrases may not be the next generation's, as we as parents seem to learn from our own children. But the word providence, y'all, is too rich and it's too heavily loaded with crucial theological nuances to allow it to pass from our language without a fight. We got to fight to preach about providence. I know somebody want to hear that God is loving and he wants you to have all that. We have to fight to keep providence in the pulpit. Providence is not a slang term for a specific generation, but it's a term with centuries, with thousands of years of historic significance. Providence is a theological term of the highest import. It's a word rooted in the ageless content of Scripture itself. So if the Scriptures are ageless, then the word providence has to be what? Ageless. Got to preach it, we got to teach it, we got to present it. We got to make it known. We can't let it die. It can't be passé, because when generations don't understand the providence of God, they think they got to fix stuff. Well, y'all didn't hear what I said. And then they try to fix it by parades, marching, and all this other type of stuff, because we haven't taught them about the providence of God. Yes, there's some horrific things happen. But none of those horrific things happen, from slavery to all of those things. None of those things happen outside of God's watch. Let me read these scriptures so I can finish on time tonight. For this reason I say to you, this is Matthew 6:25-34. Do not be worried about your life, as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on it. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. Do they not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns? And yet our heavenly Father. You ain't never seen a bird with a backpack on. You ain't never seen a bird with a backpack. Man, where you go? Man, they telling me, man, there ain't going to be no berries on that tree tomorrow. You know them people out there. And yet our Heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to your life? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that even Solomon in all of his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all of these things, for your heavenly Father knows that you need food, clothing, and shelter. Seek first the kingdom of his God. First seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and then those things, food, clothing, shelter, will be added to you. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will what? Care for itself. Each day has enough trouble in and of its own. What Jesus is teaching here in the Sermon on the Mount calls attention to the providence of God. Not just in the sense of foreknowledge. And see, this is the thing when we talk about providence, most people just think of providence as foreknowledge. And that's what I want to tell you, even though it's invisible, this is the point I want to get to. Providence is not just about foreknowledge. God knows what's going to happen down there. That's not what the word providence means in totality. Okay, let's look at what it does. Where are we at? Yes. Not in just the sense of foreknowledge, but it also refers to God's provisions for his people. Because the word providence is rooted in the Latin term for seeing or vision, some may be tempted to restrict its theological application to God's mere observance of human activity. Listen, don't limit God to just looking at human affairs. Come on now. God's providence says he also looks after human affairs. Well, I could preach right there, y'all. See, yeah, we think God was just looking at what happened at the White House. God was looking after what happened at the White House. Yeah, y'all didn't hear what I said. You didn't hear what I said. From providence, we even see the word, watch this, y'all, provide, taking care of. So God not only watches us, but God does what? Watch over us. I know you think you out there on your own and God don't see you when you go across the state line. I went to Florida last week, Louisiana. I think I saw some of y'all license plates when I was turning off in Lake Charles. Somebody say, you think you see me? Yeah, exit 44 on I-10, take you down to the Casado. I saw some of y'all license plates now. But people believe, they just think that God, he watches over, but not after. Okay, I tried to break it down so we could get it. Think about this. Parenting is not just watching your children grow. Parenting involves what? Watching over them after their growth. It involves making what? Provisions, not just for your family's present situation, but for your family's future as well. Now, we got too many of them in here, I can't name them tonight, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, see him tonight, right, that guy right there after, and then we got one sitting over there in me tonight, see them tonight. But for when you're talking about wills and inheritance and life insurance and all those things, that's looking after your family. Parenting is that too. You know what I'm saying? I know some people say, I ain't leave my kids nothing, whatever, anyhow. A good parent looks not just over, but after. Now, y'all, if we can look out for, over, and after our children, make sure they got provisions, no matter what it means, and we are sinners, what make you think our sinless God would not look over, after, during, for his children? That's what that word, when we talk about providence, everybody just see providence as God just setting something up for you to fail down the road. That's not the total definition of God setting something up for you to hate down the road. Oh, God knew I didn't want to do that. That's not the total definition of providence. Providence has to do with divine sustenance. Making provisions for things has to do with the providing of sustenance. If you cooked a meal for your husband or your children today or whatever, you provided what? Sustenance for them. Sustenance is what is required to keep things going or to keep them alive. Anybody get what I just said? I underline that. The ancient Hebrew looked for the benediction of God, whereby God will not only bless his people. Whenever you see God's benedictions, it ain't just a goodbye in it. You'll get this in a minute. God will not only bless his people, but he would also keep them. Now unto him who is able to keep us from stumbling and falling, to the only wise God, our righteous Savior, be their glory, majesty, dominion, and power, both now and for that's one of the benedictions in the Bible. Providence ain't God just saying, I done set something up, and you're going to have to deal with it when you get down there. When you get to that point, you got to deal with it. Providence is also includes divine sustenance. This benediction was deeply concerned with the preservation of his people. In a word, it focused on the sustaining of his people. Divine sustenance is tied to the biblical concept of creation. The opening words of the Bible in Genesis 1:1, you know what it says. In the beginning, God created what? Heavens and the earth. The Hebrew word for create is the word where we get bara, which also is a concept built into the concept of the word bara is the notion of sustenance, sustaining. Y'all ain't praying with me? When God created what he did on the first day, and then he created something on the second day, what he created on the first day was still sustained. You getting where I'm going with this? Then when what he created on the first and the second day, he created stuff on the third day, the stuff on the second and the first day was still sustaining. And I could go further and further. And when he decided to create the sun, a lesser light, the sun, the one for us, the earth, and set it in a socket in the earth, in the universe, because the sun doesn't move, he set it there. Guess what, y'all? It's still there. So he had to be sustaining it. That's providence. That's providence. Lord have mercy. He sustains it. We do push-ups, set-ups, and all of that stuff, curls and all that stuff. We walk 8 miles a day and all that stuff. But guess what? It's still God who sustains our life. Healthy people die every day. Let me hear this. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let me get to it. All right. Here's an explanation of sustaining. I was going to do it tonight, but on the piano, but since the camera's not ready. In music, and I know y'all don't know what I know about music because I don't let y'all know. All right? But in music, we know that the sound of staccato is a note. It's a short, brief, and abrupt note. It's a sound like a beep. It's almost like if you hit one key on the piano. Boop, bing, bing. All right? That's called a staccato note. It's short, it's abrupt, it is bing. It's like a beep. However, in contrast, if the tone is sustained, if it's elongated, if it's drawn out, if it sounds like beep, oh, y'all not paying with me. That's when you strike a note on the piano, and you know that pedal that a lot of folks don't know, they think it's a gas pedal down there at the bottom of the piano? Yeah. You can strike a note, hold that pedal, and it'll hold that note. That's called sustaining, ladies and gentlemen. You strike a note on the piano, hold the pedal down to sustain the sound. Well, similarly, God's work of creation is not a staccato action. God didn't just, boop, just go boop, 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 just abruptly. No. The providence says that God is sustaining it. He's keeping it. And he not only is sustaining it, he's sustaining it like he created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing. Other gods need stuff. God created everything he created out of nothing. Not only did he create it out of nothing, God keeps them in existence with no help from anything else. The biblical term for this is where we get the term uphold. I'm going to go 2 minutes longer tonight, but I want to get through this. Hebrews 1:1-3. It says, in the beginning, sound like Genesis 1, doesn't it? I'm sorry. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers of the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also what? made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory, the exact representation of his nature, and here's the word, and he upholds, sustains, how many things in the world he created? All things, and he does it by what? The word of his power. Nothing outside of thermodynamics will have nothing to do with this. Laws of universal laws of gravitation have nothing to do with this. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Please note that this upholding, this invisible providence, if you will, it refers to all creatures, all actions, and all things from the greatest to the least. As I gave the example about the least sea monster in the ocean, well, that same thing from the least person on the earth to the greatest person on the earth. From a person in poverty to the president. It doesn't matter. That verse tells us that he refers to all creatures, actions, and things from the greatest to the least. So that's not even an act that a sinner does that God providentially doesn't control. See, when you know God like that and you serve God like that, then all this other stuff, is ancillary. It doesn't. Let me go ahead. Please note this upholding, this invisible, yes. This refers to the scope of the sustenance of divine providence, which extends to and includes everything that is. That is not God being merely interested in the big picture. God's management of his creation is, as Pastor Charles says about me all the time, is micromanagement. Well, y'all, I got that from God. I got that from Jesus. From God. I don't just look at the big picture. I want to see all the stuff in between it. Well, God, in his management, is not just merely interested in the big picture. He's not just, okay, I created it. Now y'all figure it out. How to sustain it. Global warming. Talked to the guys last night, David Muir, y'all know him, ABC News at night. David Muir said, I was finna try to imitate him, but my voice is gone. Long story short, I'm a Bosterizer first, and I'm going to tell you what he said. Bosterize, he said, it's been hot as hell the last 5 years, 5 days on earth. It's hot as hell. But this is what he said. The last 5 days on earth is the hottest days recorded in the planet of time recording. That's what he said. And I was saying when he got through saying, I said, Dave, it's going to get hotter than that. So he then, the immediately folk went to global warming and all of this stuff and say the whales and the plastic bottles and all that other stuff. Can I help y'all out? That ain't going to stop. Providentially, God told us all this type of stuff was going to happen. So here we are now, having some of the hottest days recorded, which is going to get hotter. Some of the floods that are happening, which is going to become more. And look at us, we sitting here going like, man, we ain't got hit with a flood. We just got a little heat. Just keep waking up. Because it ain't that we don't deserve it right here in Pearland, in Houston, Texas. It ain't that we don't deserve it. God is micromanaging and sustaining everything. Yeah, we might, didn't treat the earth, like we should have. That's why Romans 8 say that all nature is groaning. I told y'all that they groan. They can't wait till Jesus Christ come back because that's when things get better for them. The trees going like, man, I'll be glad when Jesus come back because y'all messed up all of nature. But God is providentially in charge of all of that. When you understand the providence of God, then you're not going to put the heat, the weather, the snow, the cold, the storms, the what, outside of the range of God. meaning he is concerned and involved with the smallest and minutest details of everything he created. And just for the record, y'all, he created everything. The upholding work of God is also a holy sustaining. In this regard, the term holy refers both to his transcendent majesty and to his perfect righteousness. There is no flaw of intelligence, wisdom, or righteousness in the work of his sustenance. What God keeps, he keeps righteously. Woo! What God keeps, he keeps righteously. God don't let it rot into unrighteousness. What God keeps, he keeps righteously. And so his standard, that's what I'm saying, his standard is right. God don't change his standard because of another generation or because of another period of time or because something is involved. His holy sustenance, his same laws he had back then, those are the laws he has for us now. What God keeps, he keeps righteously. So there's no need for anyone to question or wonder why God allows evil to seemingly go unchecked. Wars and people dying and killing and all of that. Because the duration of all things are in his hand. And their time span is controlled by his providence according to his wisdom and according to his what? Holy purpose. Remember, God does not indulge in guesswork on his prognostications. God ain't guessing. His foreknowledge is both infallible and absolute. There is nothing in the future that he does not already know. He knows the end from the very beginning. Look at Isaiah say this when we let it go. See, we're looking around at people and think we need to fix them and help them and do all this stuff. Y'all, Isaiah 46:9-10 says, remember the former things long past, for I am God, and there is no other like him. I am God, and there is no one like me. Declaring what? The end from the beginning. So he said, providentially, I don't care what happened all in between, it's going to end just like I want it to end. Declaring the end from the beginning and from the ancient times from which have not been done, saying my purpose, not may, but will what? Be established, and I will him accomplish all what? My good pleasure. In other words, God upholds all things to what end? It is to the praise of his glory. I know this is a difficult concept to embrace in the full measure because it suggests the kind of self-centeredness of God. And we're taught to see self-centeredness as a sin. But I close with this. Yes, indeed, self-centeredness is a sin. Hold it, for any creature, but not the creator. And you can use that for a sermon. Self-centeredness is a sin for any creature, but not the creator. We mortals are called to be God-centered in our thinking. For creatures, God-centeredness is a virtue, and self-centeredness is a vice, a sin. But for God, self-centeredness is pure virtue because it is also God-centered. Do you understand what I'm saying? For God to be self-centered, that's God being centered on himself, who is what? God. Y'all ain't praying with me. So, for God's self-centeredness is pure virtue because it's God centering on himself. But for us to be God-centered is for us to fix our attention upon the most perfect being, so it is for God himself that we're putting all our attention to. Though what God does in his providence benefits us, its highest virtue is found in the glorification of himself. God upholding of his creation, that's what Hebrews was talking about, reflects upon his glory, and that glory is not a divine vice, but it's the highest possible good. If God was centered on something less than himself, that focus would reflect a defect in him. If God was impressed by somebody else or anything else that any of us could do, then God wouldn't be God. God is not impressed with things that we do. If God was centered on something less than himself, that focus would reflect the defect in him and render him less than God and unworthy of our worship. I know it's a sweet and excellent paradox that God's provisions for his creatures and his invisible upholding of his creation is also, ladies and gentlemen, the manifestation of his eternal glory. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.